that is, I guess, another somewhat advantage of this being that it's tape, not just cord. It doesn't tangle the way that this is set up to come out. So for the PCU-10P, the personal lowering device, if we are in a ejection seat aircraft, typically an ACES-2 ejection seat for typical fighters, they're going to wear a torso harness, which is the PCU-15P or PCU-16P, depending on the size. To mount this on, if the commander or the area they're going into requires it, that might be prevalent with higher trees, we actually have to either mount snaps to this for the PLD to snap into, or we can then apply a reinforcement strip of webbing similar to this without the zipper on it, so that way we can hand tack with a cotton thread to maintain that it stays in place and doesn't damage the webbing as much. So we have to modify the piece of equipment just to apply that, and then the braking mechanism that is used currently, that I'll show you in a minute on those, is folded up and actually as well hand tacked to the harness, so that way it's in place. Currently, the legacy PCU-10P, the pocket is just hand tacked to the harness at some point wherever we want to put it, and then the excess is routed back into it. If they are going to be in an environment that has a survival vest requirement, we would put the survival vest, potentially over the top, depending on what application it is, but more than likely it would go over the top. The risers would go down through here, and the pocket, instead of being mounted on the harness, PLD would get threaded through the MOLLE somewhere over here, depending on where it's the most comfortable for the air crew and or the application, depending on what other items they have on the vest. Between his body and the vest material on this harness, acting as a back pad similar to the back automatics parachutes. So that's the real estate that it has to go on for this application. And in this configuration, we usually mount the PLD, the pocket for that somewhere on this, and it's hand tacked, both in the back as well as here. Putting a vest on over, then this would get routed out and installed somewhere through the MOLLE rather than hand tacking. But with this application, you potentially have also the ability to put it through MOLLE if that was a capability, versus the traditional one where we just hand tack it or snap it on. It's another option. Before you right now, this is a back automatic, a BA-22 style parachute system, and then the BA-30, which is the newer version, the low profile parachute. You see them, this one is getting phased out by this one. This one has the PCU-10P PLD attached to it already in the similar fashion to what will be attached to this. And it's attached at 4 lift-the-dot snaps that just snap into the outside. This one has what comes with it, which is just a back pad that protects the wearer from this rail, whereas the newer version, that rail is not there. So it doesn't necessarily need to be a pad. It already has padding in it, and the ripcord travels down the other side of the parachute versus this one. It was just snaps were added to this so you could easily attach the legacy PLD. If for a cargo or heavy style aircraft, these would be just pre-positioned with this on the parachute itself. That way the aircrew doesn't have to think about it. Whereas if it was like we talked about with the fighter style aircraft, it gets attached, whether it's tacked or we add snaps to the harness to modify this for that application. So in the back style configuration, you can see currently the PLD is between this, prevents it from any kind of wind blast during bailout, or even the torso harness that's between the vest material and the person for wind blast, because they can hit upwards of 600 knots during an injection. And the excess of this tape is just routed and it's tacked, whereas that one, the Legacy, it's just tacked on the main lift web a little bit higher. Some of the benefits of the Legacy is the braking system and the attachment system are very compact, very small, relatively simple to use. Not always, the function of them isn't as always smooth as we would like it to be, but it all fits in that pouch. Whereas a lot of climbing systems now, you have a carabiner and then a braking function separately, whereas this, they're very small and they can all fit in that one pouch. As long as they can hold the individual for that one-time use they need to get out of the tree, the smaller the better. So basically at this point, if you're stuck in a tree, one of our first or our primary attachment point would be through the parachute risers because they're the closest thing to you. You could potentially have injured limbs from going through the tree line or whatever else you've gotten through to this situation, whether it's an ejection or a bailout. Potentially you might have to work this with one hand. The first thing you're going to do is make sure you're secure in the tree and kind of bounce a little bit, move around, and make sure that you're just not going to start falling again by securing to this. That, if for some reason you start slipping and falling, that might be motivation to go, oh, maybe I want to go to a tree limb or something else before you break yourself free of the parachute. So go ahead and just unzip, pull it out, take the free end, route it through the risers, through both, and then clip it back to that free ring. You might need to push the button. And then clip that to your chest strap. Make sure it's secure. Secure. Hold on the riser with the other hand. Pull, and then pull the ring. Slide your thumb through the ring. Pull out. And then same for the other side. You ready? In this situation right now, it's braking itself, which is what you would want in your initial drop. Then, however, function ideally initiated by the crew member to descend and have the ability to initiate stopping it at any point before they reach the bottom. So when flying in a normal configuration without a vest or anything else on, you're pretty much limited to this surface areas to attach the braking device potentially, or somewhere back in here because they have to at least be able to reach it with whatever free hand is available to them once they actually post ejection or any of that nature. If it's somehow back up in here too far, at least the braking or attachment mechanism they have to be able to get to somehow. The colors ideally would be in some shade of either coyote brown or a sage green or some variation of that way, because the Legacy parachute systems and Legacy harnesses are all sage green. Most of it is transitioning to a coyote brown depending on the environment they're going into. If that can be swapped out easily with the case, the better. And as long as it's not directly against the individual, it can be nylon, it can be any really synthetic fabric. We're not really worried about the FR capability like most of our clothing. That's what the clothing is designed for. The rope itself, we're not too concerned. Whatever it's in case that individual doesn't need to use it, it's still concealed. Ideally is one of a sage or a coyote tan or something of that variation.